At the beginning of 1519, the Aztec Empire stood as one of the most powerful political entities in Mesoamerica. From the outside, it appeared to be a single unified people. But in reality, this empire had emerged in 1428 through an alliance between three major city-states: Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. As time passed, Tenochtitlan rose above the others and became the dominant power of the region. Yet, this rise often meant fear and oppression for the surrounding peoples. Communities that fell under Aztec control were not only forced to provide tribute and raw materials, but also required to send a constant supply of prisoners for human sacrifice. One of the most striking aspects of Aztec religious rituals was the tradition of human sacrifice. Although historians cannot determine the exact number, it is believed that during periods of drought, thousands of people were sacrificed to the gods within just a few days. Aztec warriors carried out special campaigns known as flower wars, with the purpose of capturing live prisoners. Records even suggest that some members of the aristocracy consumed parts of the bodies of those who had been sacrificed. Still, judging Aztec society solely through these dark rituals would be incomplete. Tenochtitlan was remarkable not only for warfare and sacrifice, but also for the importance it placed on knowledge. The city contained large libraries filled with manuscripts on religion, genealogy, astronomy, government, history, and geography. The people of the city, known as the Mexica, valued education and intellectual achievement. The event that would change the course of history began in February 1519. A group of several hundred Spanish conquistadors arrived on the shores of the Gulf of Mexico in search of mysterious cities rumored to be overflowing with gold. The leader of this expedition was Hernán Cortés. Cortés was following the route of two previous expeditions that had explored the region before him. However, his journey was troubled from the very beginning. After conflicts with the Cuban governor Diego Velázquez de Cuellar, his authorization for the expedition had been revoked at the last moment. Yet, Cortés refused to back down. Defying orders openly, he sailed toward Mesoamerica anyway. He knew that failure would likely mean imprisonment or even execution. For him, success was not merely a goal, it was the only path to survival. When the Spaniards reached the Yucatan Peninsula, they gained an unexpected advantage. They discovered a Spaniard named Jerónimo de Aguilar, who had survived a shipwreck years earlier and had learned the Maya language. Aguilar immediately became Cortés's interpreter. Shortly afterward, he proved invaluable during negotiations with the Maya city of Potonchén. As part of a peace agreement, the Maya presented Cortés with 20 female slaves. Among them was a woman who spoke both Maya and Nahuatl. This woman, later known as La Malinche, together with Aguilar, became the key link that allowed Cortés to communicate with the Aztec world. Now Cortés possessed not only steel weapons and gunpowder, but also the power of language. As the Spaniards advanced toward their final destination, Cortés announced the establishment of the first Spanish settlement at Veracruz. In reality, it was not yet a true city. It was largely a political maneuver designed to free Cortés from the authority of the Cuban governor. Meanwhile, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma II had already learned of the foreigners' arrival. The Spaniards were soon greeted by his representatives. Although their approach appeared friendly, Cortés understood that this calm atmosphere would not last. The Spaniards were heavily outnumbered, and a direct confrontation with the Aztec armies would be difficult. Fortunately for him, many subject peoples hated Aztec rule because of years of harsh domination. Communities such as the Totonacs were quickly persuaded to side with the Spaniards. When Moctezuma learned that the Spaniards had formed alliances with local peoples, he grew concerned. He sent additional envoys carrying gold and fine cloth to Cortés. His goal was both to satisfy the newcomers and to prevent them from marching toward Tenochtitlan. Yet, the plan backfired. Rather than turning back, Cortés became even more encouraged by the sight of gold and decided to march directly toward the capital. To ensure that his men could not retreat, he ordered the destruction of his own ships. There would be no turning back. As the Spaniards crossed into Tlaxcalan territory, war erupted. Tlaxcalan warriors attacked Cortés's forces for days, while the Spaniards responded with raids on villages. After weeks of fighting, both sides were exhausted. Eventually, Cortés convinced the Tlaxcalans that the Aztecs were their common enemy. Having fought the Aztecs in the Flower Wars for generations, the Tlaxcalans seized the opportunity for revenge and joined the Spaniards. But the violence did not end there. When Cortés and his allies entered the city of Cholula, a massacre followed. Civilians were slaughtered over the course of several days. Cholula was an important religious center and had once been under Tlaxcalan influence before later allying itself with the Aztecs. The exact reasons for the massacre remain unclear, but it was likely driven both by the Tlaxcalans' desire to eliminate an old rival and by the Spaniards' intention to intimidate other cities. In November, the Conquistadors finally reached Tenochtitlan. With a population of around 300,000 inhabitants, the enormous city surpassed many European cities of the time. Its canals, bridges, palaces, and temples left the Spaniards astonished. Some struggled to believe what they were seeing was real. Moctezuma welcomed Cortés into his palace. There, the Spaniards discovered hidden chambers filled with gold. Jewels, ingots, and decorative treasures only increased the conquistadors' greed. Cortés later demanded permission to place crosses and images of the Virgin Mary inside Aztec temples. This caused outrage among the people, and violence erupted in which several Spaniards were killed. Realizing the danger of the situation, Cortés placed Moctezuma under house arrest within the palace. In doing so, he effectively took indirect control of the city. Moctezuma, however, continued trying to avoid open conflict. He even allowed the Spaniards to build Catholic altars inside sacred spaces. In the eyes of his people, this seriously damaged his authority. At that very moment, a new threat emerged. The Cuban governor sent a large force under Pánfilo de Narváez to arrest Cortés. Upon hearing the news, Cortés left the city with his best soldiers to confront Narváez. In Tenochtitlan, he left behind a small garrison under Pedro de Alvarado. Alvarado was an impatient and ruthless man. During a major Aztec festival in 1520, he attacked the mostly unarmed nobles and warriors gathered inside the temple, slaughtering hundreds. The Spaniards claimed they had acted to stop human sacrifice. The Aztecs insisted that the Spaniards were motivated by greed for the gold jewelry worn during the ceremony. The massacre sparked a massive uprising throughout the city. Moctezuma attempted to calm the population, but it was too late. The people had turned even against their own emperor. When Cortés returned, the city was already in open revolt. Moctezuma tried to speak to the crowd but was struck by stones and spears. Soon afterward, he died. The Spaniards could no longer remain in the city. Cortés ordered a nighttime retreat. As the soldiers fled across the bridges during a storm, they were attacked by Aztec forces. Many drowned in the lake because of the gold they carried. This event would later become known as La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows. Hundreds of Spaniards and thousands of native allies were killed. Most of the artillery and many horses were lost. Yet Cortés was not completely defeated. Shortly afterward, he defeated another Aztec army at Otumba and withdrew to Tlaxcala to rebuild his forces. Meanwhile, the Aztecs faced an even greater catastrophe, smallpox. They had no immunity to the disease brought from Europe. Thousands died within a short time. The new emperor Cuitlahuac also succumbed to the illness. Within only a few months, millions of people had perished. In 1521, Cortés marched once again toward Tenochtitlan. This time he had far more native allies at his side. The Spaniards laid siege to the city, cut off its water routes, and constructed brigantines to dominate the lake. Throughout the long siege, the Aztecs resisted fiercely. Hunger, disease, and constant attacks slowly consumed the city. Finally, on August 13th, 1521, the city fell. The last Aztec ruler, Cuauhtémoc, was captured while attempting to escape. The city was then looted and largely destroyed. As for Cortés, he was rewarded for his victory by the Spanish crown and appointed governor of New Spain. The destruction of a vast empire by a relatively small group of conquistadors became one of history's most remarkable conquests. Yet this victory was not achieved through Spanish weapons alone. The support of native allies, the hesitation of Moctezuma, and the devastating effects of disease were just as important in the collapse of the Aztec Empire as warfare itself. With the empire's fall, Spanish domination over Mesoamerica began. The spread of Catholicism, the blending of cultures and marriages between Spaniards and natives gradually laid the foundations of modern Mexico. The fall of the Aztec Empire did not simply mean the collapse of a capital city. It marked the transformation of an entire world. Upon the ruins of Tenochtitlan, a completely new order began to rise. After capturing the city, the Spaniards destroyed many of the old temples. Their stones were dismantled and reused to construct churches, administrative buildings, and colonial structures. Places where Aztec priests had once carried out sacred rituals were now filled with Catholic prayers. Under Spanish rule, the social structure of the region changed rapidly. Large portions of the native population were either forced or pressured into converting to Christianity. Missionaries spread throughout the region while the Aztec belief system was condemned as paganism and outlawed. Many ancient religious objects were destroyed, manuscripts were burned, and centuries of accumulated knowledge disappeared forever. A significant part of Mesoamerica's cultural memory was erased from history. At the same time, the Spaniards could not govern the region as though it were an empty land. Some surviving native nobles adapted to the new order. Certain Aztec aristocrats attempted to preserve their status under Spanish rule. Some even adopted Christian names and accepted positions within the colonial administration. In this way, fragments of the old world became absorbed into the new colonial system. For the Spaniards, gold had always been one of the greatest motivations behind the conquest. Yet it soon became clear that Mesoamerica was worth far more than treasure alone. Its fertile lands, vast trade networks, and enormous population represented immense economic value for Spain. Because of this, the conquests did not stop. Cortés' success inspired other conquistadors, and new campaigns spread across the rest of Central America. For the conquered peoples, however, life became extremely difficult. Native communities were placed under the encomienda system, which tied them to Spanish landowners. In theory, this arrangement promised protection and Christian instruction. In reality, it often became a system of forced labor. Thousands of natives worked under brutal conditions in mines, plantations, and construction projects. Since European diseases continued to spread, the population declined even further. After smallpox came additional epidemics such as measles, typhus, and influenza. Indigenous peoples having no immunity to these illnesses were left defenseless. In some regions, more than half the population disappeared within only a few decades. This demographic collapse shook not only Aztec society, but the entire economic and cultural structure of Mesoamerica. Even so, native culture did not vanish completely. The Nahuatl language survived. Traditions, cuisine, music, and popular beliefs blended with Spanish influence to create a new cultural synthesis. Over time, marriages between Spaniards and indigenous peoples became increasingly common, giving rise to a large mixed heritage population known as mestizos. The foundations of modern Mexican society were built upon this fusion. The personal story of Cortés proved almost as dramatic as the conquest itself. Although he was once celebrated as one of Spain's greatest heroes, over time he began to lose influence at court. Political rivalries and disputes within the colonial administration weakened his authority. Nevertheless, history would always remember him as the man who destroyed the Aztec Empire. The Aztec legacy, however, did not disappear. Even today, many elements of Mexico's culture still carry traces of Aztec influence. The eagle symbol on the Mexican flag itself originates from an Aztec foundation legend. Meanwhile, modern Mexico City, built upon the site of ancient Tenochtitlan, remains one of the largest cities in the world. Throughout history, the fall of the Aztecs has often been portrayed either as the triumph of civilization over barbarism, or conversely as the destruction of a great culture by greedy invaders. In reality, the truth is far more complex. The Spaniards did not conquer the empire alone. Without the support of native allies, Cortés would have had little chance of success. Likewise, the devastation caused by disease proved just as decisive as military force. This conquest was also a collision between two worlds. On one side stood Europeans armed with gunpowder, steel weapons, and horses. On the other stood Mesoamerican civilizations that had built enormous cities and developed sophisticated religious and political systems. The outcome was not merely a military defeat, but a transformation that reshaped the future of an entire continent. Throughout the 16th century, the Spanish Empire continued expanding its power across the Americas. After the Aztecs, the Inca Empire also fell, and Spain became one of the wealthiest states in the world. Gold and silver flowing from the Americas transformed the European economy. At the same time, products, ideas, and cultures arriving from the New World began reshaping the Old World as well. Yet the cost of this wealth was paid largely by indigenous peoples. Conquests, epidemics, and colonial exploitation devastated millions of lives. Still, the surviving communities never completely lost their cultural identity. Modern Latin American societies are the result of a complex historical heritage that carries both indigenous and European roots at the same time. The rise and fall of the Aztec Empire continues to fascinate historians, researchers, and people around the world even today. This story is not only about battles and conquests, but also about human ambition, fear, belief, disease, and the collision of civilizations. The end of one empire became the beginning of an entirely new world.